They didn't bury me in a grave. They buried me in a nursing home. I, Martha Wilson, raised my only son, Thomas, with hands that scrubbed floors till they bled, a back bent from 3 jobs, and a heart stretched thin but never broken. After my husband's early passing, it was just the two of us. I pawned my wedding ring to buy Thomas a graduation suit. I went hungry more than once so he could have lunch money. I thought love was like a boomerang. If you throw it out there, surely it will come back when you need it most. But that belief shattered the Tuesday I fainted in my kitchen. Low blood sugar, the doctor said. A few days of rest, they said. But when Thomas and his wife Ashley came over that evening, I saw something strange in their eyes. "Mama, we just want what's best for you," Thomas cooed. Ashley nodded with a rehearsed sympathy that made my stomach twist. Within the week, they took me out to lunch. We laughed, we reminisced. And then they left me at a nursing home with beige walls, plastic flowers, and a room that wasn't mine. Just for a few days, Thomas smiled as he hugged me goodbye. "Rest up, Mama." But when I asked to call him that night, the nurse handed me paperwork with his signature. Medical consent, residential admission, long-term placement. I wasn't confused. I wasn't delusional. But they had already spun their web, whispering to the neighbors that I was slipping, talking to lawyers behind my back, changing the locks on my home. They thought I'd sit quietly in that little bed, staring at the floor like the other forgotten souls, waiting to fade away. But they didn't know, Martha Wilson. I didn't raise a son through poverty and grief just to be discarded like an old pair of shoes. They thought I was too old to fight back. But I had a plan they would feel every time they walked into the house they thought they stole. Every time they opened a door and remembered the mother they tried to bury before her time. I may have been locked away, but I was not powerless. Sitting alone in that stiff-backed chair by the window of the nursing home, I, Martha Wilson, watched the sun sink behind the courtyard wall, surrounded by people who no longer remembered their own names. Some muttered to themselves. Some cried out for people long gone. Some simply stared into the distance as if waiting for life to catch up with them. But not me. My heart was pounding, not with despair, but with determination. My son, Thomas, and his wife Ashley thought they had written me off. They thought that dropping me in this place was the end of my story, that they could swoop in, take over my house, my bank accounts, my life, without consequence. But they'd made one fatal mistake. They underestimated the woman who raised them. The first 3 days were the hardest. The nursing staff was kind but firm, treating me like a delicate glass figurine that might shatter at any moment. I asked to call Thomas. Straight to voicemail. I called again and again. Then Ashley. Blocked. The same woman who once sobbed in my kitchen about her marital troubles had now shut me out without a second thought. That's when the fire lit inside me. I asked the night nurse for a pen and a notebook, smiling sweetly as I explained it was just for journaling. She handed me a small spiral pad from the activities closet. Once alone, I began writing, not poems or prayers, but facts, names, dates, account numbers. I remembered my lawyer, Monica Reed, who I hadn't spoken to in 2 years but who had always said, "Mrs. Wilson, I'll keep you on my client list, just in case." By the end of that night, I had written out everything I needed, the joint bank account Thomas thought I'd forgotten about, the house deed still in my name, the life insurance paperwork only I could access. They thought I was weak. They didn't know I had survived poverty, grief, breast cancer. They didn't know I had survived worse storms than this. The next morning, I used the facility phone to call Monica's office. She didn't answer at first. I couldn't blame her. It had been years. But I left a message as clear as glass. "Monica, this is Martha Wilson. My son has committed fraud and placed me in a care facility without my consent. I have access to the joint account and legal documents. Please call me. Before noon, she called back. Martha, are you safe? Monica's voice was sharp, concerned. They didn't bury me in a grave. They buried me in a nursing home. I, Martha Wilson, raised my only son, Thomas, with hands that scrubbed floors till they bled, a back bent from 3 jobs, and a heart stretched thin but never broken. After my husband's early passing, it was just the 2 of us. I pawned my wedding ring to buy Thomas a graduation suit. I went hungry more than once so he could have lunch money. I thought love was like a boomerang. If you throw it out there, surely it will come back when you need it most. But that belief shattered the Tuesday I fainted in my kitchen. Low blood sugar, the doctor said. A few days of rest, they said. But when Thomas and his wife Ashley came over that evening, I saw something strange in their eyes. Mama, we just want what's best for you, Thomas cooed. Ashley nodded with a rehearsed sympathy that made my stomach twist. Within the week, they took me out to lunch. We laughed, we reminisced. And then they left me at a nursing home with beige walls, plastic flowers, and a room that wasn't mine. Just for a few days, Thomas smiled as he hugged me goodbye. Rest up, Mama. But when I asked to call him that night, the nurse handed me paperwork with his signature. Medical consent, residential admission, long-term placement. I wasn't confused. I wasn't delusional. But they had already spun their web, whispering to the neighbors that I was slipping, talking to lawyers behind my back, changing the locks on my home. They thought I'd sit quietly in that little bed, staring at the floor like the other forgotten souls, waiting to fade away. But they didn't know, Martha Wilson. I didn't raise a son through poverty and grief just to be discarded like an old pair of shoes. They thought I was too old to fight back. But I had a plan they would feel every time they walked into the house they thought they stole. Every time they opened a door and remembered the mother they tried to bury before her time. The Mayfield Legacy Grant was thriving. Dozens of women in the community, many of them over 65, like her, were now attending workshops on financial literacy, learning how to safeguard their rights, and finding comfort in a sisterhood they never expected to have. Tyler had found his own light too, excelling in school and helping his grandmother expand the foundation's reach. Dolores ran her fingers across the pages of her well-worn notebook, where she had once scribbled down facts, names, and plans in the dark nights after her son left her in a nursing home. She smiled softly. Those scribbles had saved her life, but more importantly, they had helped her reclaim who she was. Looking up, Dolores wished she could tell every woman watching, every grandmother, mother, sister, and friend out there who had been made to feel small, invisible, or burdensome. You are not finished. Your life is not over because someone says so. You have the right to fight for yourself, to claim your space, and to stand tall in the truth of who you are. Even if they call you old, even if they call you difficult, even if they try to shut the door on you, you get to decide how your story ends. Dolores wanted to remind you, dear listener, that life's most valuable treasures aren't the things you pass down in a will. It's the strength you show in hard moments, the resilience you model for the next generation, and the quiet dignity of knowing you lived on your own terms. So if you're sitting there right now, feeling forgotten or left out, hear this. You are not alone, and you are not done. There is still love to give, still wisdom to share, still laughter to echo in your home. Dolores leaned back in her chair, closing her eyes as Tyler's laughter rang again outside, the sound of a boy learning what true family looks like. She had fought for this peace, and she had won, and so can you. Life lesson. In life, we sometimes face betrayals that break our hearts, especially from those we once trusted most. But remember, your worth is not defined by how others treat you. It's defined by how you stand back up, how you reclaim your dignity, and how you choose to keep living with strength and grace. You are never too old to start over, to protect your legacy, or to teach the world that you are not a burden. You are a blessing. We'd love to hear from you. What did you think of Dolores's story? Have you ever had to stand up for yourself or someone you love? Share your story in the comments below. Your words might inspire someone else today. Don't forget to hit the like button if this story touched your heart. Subscribe to our channel for more powerful life stories, and click the notification bell so you never miss a new video. Together, we can build a community where every voice is valued, every lesson is shared, and every life, no matter the age, is celebrated. Flower. Dolores Mayfield sat quietly in her favorite chair, the late afternoon sun spilling through the lace curtains onto her lap. The house smelled of lemon polish and fresh-baked cornbread, and the soft hum of Tyler's laughter floated in from the backyard, where he was watering the marigolds they had planted together. It had been almost a year since her life turned upside down, or maybe, as Dolores saw it now, right side up. Her son Thomas, who once called her a burden, had walked away from the neighborhood, leaving behind only his silence and regrets. But Dolores, the woman he thought he could lock away and erase, had built something far greater in his absence. A home filled with peace, a life rich with purpose, and a community she was proud to lift up. Sitting there, Dolores thought about all she had learned. She had learned that love, no matter how deep, could not be an excuse to let someone mistreat you. She had learned that you could forgive someone without letting them back into your life. And perhaps most importantly, she had learned that you are never too old to stand up for yourself, to rewrite your story, and to protect your dignity. Local businesses began donating, inspired by Dolores's story. The nearby university's law school offered volunteer legal support to expand the workshops. A local florist, touched by the mission, brought fresh flowers to every gathering. Even women outside the community started writing letters to Dolores. Some shared how they had been cut out of their families, while others simply thanked her for being a voice they didn't know they needed. Through it all, Dolores remained humble. "This isn't about me," she'd often say. "It's about us. About making sure that no woman, no matter how old, feels like her story has no ending worth telling." The ripple effect of Dolores's efforts began changing the fabric of the town itself. Neighbors became more attentive, checking in on elderly residents they'd once overlooked. Churches began offering elder support groups. Nursing homes faced increased scrutiny after several women, emboldened by Dolores's example, came forward about mistreatment. Even Tyler's school took notice. His history teacher asked him to share his grandmother's story in class as part of a lesson on modern-day heroes. One spring afternoon, as Dolores and Tyler sat on their porch, now framed by rows of bright red roses they had planted together, Dolores sipped her jasmine tea and watched the street grow quiet. The house next door, where her son Thomas once lived, stood empty now. He had left months earlier. And though a part of Dolores still felt the ache of that loss, she also knew she had gained something greater: the freedom to build a life defined not by betrayal, but by hope. Tyler leaned against her shoulder, his voice soft. "Grandma," he asked, "do you ever miss him?" Dolores looked out at the blooming garden, at the bees buzzing between the marigolds, at the quiet street that no longer felt haunted by old wounds. "I miss who I thought he was," she said honestly. "But I don't miss what he became." Tyler nodded, resting his head against her arm. "Thank you," he whispered, "for everything." Dolores kissed the top of his head, her eyes shining. "No, baby," she said. "Thank you, because you reminded me what family really means." As the sun dipped below the horizon, casting long golden rays across the front yard, Dolores felt a peace she hadn't known in years. She was no longer just surviving. She was thriving. She was helping others thrive. And in that moment, she knew The legacy she was building, not just through money, but through courage, community, and love, would outlast everything. She hadn't just reclaimed her life, she had changed the lives of countless others, and that was a burden she was proud to carry. When Dolores Mayfield first signed her name on the paperwork to launch the Mayfield Legacy Grant, she didn't do it for recognition. She did it because she knew she wasn't the only woman who had been discarded, betrayed, or quietly erased. The grant, funded by the proceeds from the sale of her home and the careful savings she had protected across a lifetime, was designed to help older women in crisis. Women like her, who had been labeled a burden by their own families, locked away in nursing homes, or stripped of their financial independence by people they once trusted. Word spread quickly through their small town. Dolores, once known as just a quiet widow who kept to herself, became a symbol of resilience. Women from all walks of life, retired school teachers, widowed church volunteers, longtime homemakers, came forward, sharing their own stories of being overlooked, dismissed, or taken advantage of. And Dolores welcomed them all. She organized monthly tea gatherings at the local community center where women could come together, not just to socialize, but to reclaim their voices. They talked about everything: how to read their own bank statements, how to understand power of attorney documents, how to protect their rights if someone tried to exploit them. She partnered with her attorney, Monica Reeves, to run workshops on elder legal rights. They brought in local bank representatives to explain how to set up secure accounts, and healthcare advocates to teach women how to recognize the warning signs of financial or emotional abuse. It wasn't just about money, it was about dignity. Dolores often told the women, "They called us burdens, but we are builders. We built homes, raised families, volunteered at schools, cooked meals, ran churches, and kept entire communities standing. We are not burdens. We are the backbone." Her grandson Tyler was right there by her side. He helped set up chairs, handed out flyers, and made sure the older women had rides to the events. Dolores smiled every time she watched him work, not just because she was proud, but because she knew he was absorbing something powerful. The idea that love isn't proven by empty words or forced smiles. It's proven by presence, by action, by staying when it's hard and showing up when it matters. Over time, the Mayfield Legacy Grant grew. When I look back now, I don't see the anger. I see the lessons. I see myself, Dolores Mayfield, as a woman who was nearly erased but found her way back. Not through bitterness or revenge, but through purpose. After everything Thomas did, the betrayal, the lies, the nursing home, the forged documents, I could have chosen to carry the weight of resentment for the rest of my days, but I didn't. Instead, I chose to reclaim my life and rebuild something meaningful. My grandson Tyler became part of that healing. Watching him flourish, his eyes brighter, his smile more frequent, his curiosity blooming again, reminded me that family isn't about bloodlines. It's about presence. It's about who shows up, who listens, who loves without demanding anything in return. That's why the Mayfield Legacy Grant was born, not as a monument to my pain, but as a hand reaching out to other women who have been pushed aside. I knew there were others like me, mothers, grandmothers, women who gave everything to their families and were left with nothing but silence. Now I spend my days gardening, painting, and sharing meals with Tyler, and my evenings writing letters and making plans for the future of the grant. Sometimes I still see Thomas sitting on his porch, his shoulders heavy, his face lined with regret. But I don't look away out of cruelty. I look away because his healing is no longer my burden to carry. I've learned that closure doesn't come from an apology. It comes from reclaiming your own narrative, from standing tall in the life you choose, even if no one else ever says, "I'm sorry." Some mornings I sit on my porch, sipping jasmine tea, the sun warming my face, and I think about the younger woman I once was, the one who believed her worth was tied to how much she could give. But now, I know better. I am not a burden. I am not disposable. I am a woman with a story, a voice, and a purpose. And as long as I have breath in my body, I will use that voice to remind others like me. You are not too old to fight for your dignity. You are not too late to begin again, and you are never, ever too small to matter. The rest of my estate, the money from the house sale, my retirement savings, the quiet life insurance policies I tucked away years ago, all of it is set to fund the Mayfield Legacy Grant, a new program at our local community center. It will serve older women who, like me, have been discarded by the very children they once sacrificed everything to raise. Women who need just one more helping hand to pull them back into dignity, back into purpose. When I signed those papers, I didn't feel rage or bitterness. I felt peace. Because this was never just about punishing Thomas. It was about planting something bigger. A few Sundays ago, the community center invited me to speak at their Elder Justice Seminar, a room filled mostly with women over 60, their eyes lined with stories. Some of them wore soft cardigans, some came dressed in church hats and pearls, some had walkers, some brought their adult children to sit beside them. I stood at the podium and spoke plainly. They will call you old, I said. They will call you a burden. They will smile while stealing the life you built, and they will convince you that your voice is too small to matter. I looked out across the room at the tears welling up in a few women's eyes. But let me tell you something, I continued. There is power in the truth. There is power in silence, and there is power in the law, if you're brave enough to use it. They clapped. Some wept. One woman came up afterward, hugged me tightly, and whispered, "Thank you for reminding me I'm not crazy." And that's what it really was about. Not revenge, legacy. Making sure our stories aren't erased just because our hair has turned gray. Making sure no one gets left behind in a room that smells like bleach and pity. Making sure we aren't treated like broken things, but like whole women with lifetimes of strength behind us. That night, back at home, Tyler set the table while I pulled sweet potato pies from the oven. He laughed about something from school, a funny teacher, a prank a friend played, and for a moment, the house felt light, almost like it had when my husband was still alive. I sat down at the kitchen table and watched Tyler butter his cornbread, his face so full of life, so far removed from the storm that had once raged inside that house next door. "You're going to be okay," I told him softly. He looked up, confused. "You're going to be okay," I repeated. "Because you know where you come from, and you know where you're going, and no one can take that from you." Later that night, I sat by the window, looking out at Thomas's darkened house. He hadn't left town, though many thought he might. He stayed, perhaps hoping he could fix things just by being nearby. But proximity doesn't heal what betrayal broke. He came by once, stood on my porch, hat in hand, voice trembling. "Why are you doing this?" he asked. I didn't shout. I didn't argue. I simply said, "Because you forgot who I was, Thomas. But I never forgot who you were." He left quietly. Now, as I sit here with the moonlight streaming through the curtains, the soft hum of Tyler's laughter in the background, the scent of pie cooling on the stove, I realize I am not at the end of anything. I am at the beginning. The beginning of a legacy built on strength, on truth, on the quiet, unshakable power of a woman who refuses to be erased. They tried to bury me, but they didn't know I was a seed. And now I am blooming, stronger, brighter, and freer than I have ever been. I never imagined that peace in the last chapter of my life would look like this. Not long ago, I thought my days would end inside a lonely nursing home room, staring at beige walls and waiting for visits that never came. But now I wake up every morning in a cozy house of my own. The house right next door to my son Thomas, the same man who once betrayed me, the same man who now quietly watches from his porch as I sit surrounded by blooming roses and the laughter of his son, my grandson, Tyler. Thomas doesn't speak to me much anymore. After Ashley packed her bags and left, storming off to Texas without so much as a backward glance, he stayed behind, alone. His house grew dim and silent, the once busy rooms hollow with absence. He sits outside sometimes, a beer in his hand, eyes distant, as if trying to piece together how everything he built slipped through his fingers. But me? I don't waste my energy looking over there. I have a garden to tend, a home to fill with the scent of cinnamon toast and lemon polish, and a grandson who has practically moved in, calling this our place now. Tyler comes home from school with his backpack slung low, kicking off his shoes at the door, eager to tell me about his day. We bake sweet potato pies, tend to the marigolds, and dream up plans for a summer vegetable patch. I see light returning to his young eyes, a light that had been dimmed by too many nights of hearing his parents argue, too many days caught between loyalty and confusion. And I realize, this isn't just about reclaiming my own dignity. It's about giving Tyler something solid, something safe, something no one can take away from him. Monica, my lawyer, delivered the final copy of my will last month. It was all tidy, carefully notarized, every word written with the weight of experience. The house where I now live? It goes to Tyler when he turns 21, along with a trust that will cover his education, his living expenses, and anything else he needs to launch his adult life. As for Thomas, nothing. Not out of spite. But because inheritance, I've learned, is something you earn through love, not entitlement. I had one more move to make. One they'd never see coming. A few days after the sale went through, I bought the house next door. Not out of spite, but out of purpose. I wanted Thomas to understand, every single day, that I was no longer a woman to be erased. I wanted him to see me, sitting on my new porch, in the house I bought with my own name, on my own terms. I moved in on a bright, clear morning. I wore my favorite blue Sunday hat, sat on the front steps with a cup of sweet tea, and waited. Thomas came outside holding a trash bag and his phone, wearing old gym shorts and a wrinkled t-shirt. He stopped dead when he saw me. For a split second, his face crumpled in disbelief. Then, without a word, he turned and went right back inside. I didn't move. I just smiled into my tea. Over the next few days, Ashley avoided me, pulling the curtains tighter every time she saw me in the yard. Thomas wouldn't meet my eyes. Their bright, bustling house, once filled with music, parties, and noise, grew quieter. The porch lights dimmed, the garden wilted. I planted red roses along my fence, their blooms like little flames between us. Monica called it petty. I called it peaceful warfare. Then one day, a for sale sign appeared in their yard. Crooked, hastily jammed into the lawn. I watched from my porch as Thomas stood beside it, arms folded, shoulders tense. Ashley stormed outside, yelling, pacing, pointing. I couldn't hear the words, but I could read the scene like a well-worn book. They were crumbling. I didn't gloat. Not outwardly. I simply sat with the knowledge that sometimes the loudest revenge isn't noise, it's silence. That weekend, Thomas's son, Tyler, knocked on my door. 14 years old, backpack slung over his shoulder, eyes wide and uncertain. "Grandma," he said softly, "can I sit with you a while?" I welcomed him in without question. We sat side by side on the porch, sipping iced tea, watching the sun dip behind the rooftops. Tyler told me haltingly about the fighting at home, about how his mom wanted to leave, about how his dad sat in the dark most nights, silent and lost. And I realized something I hadn't expected. This story, my story, wasn't just about reclaiming my own power. It was about making sure the next generation, Tyler, understood what strength really looked like. We spent the weekend together, cooking, playing cards, talking about the past. I showed him photos of his grandfather, told him stories Thomas had never bothered to pass down. That night, as I tucked him into the guest room, Tyler whispered, "You're not a burden, Grandma." I smiled through tears. "I know, baby. I know that now." Sitting by the window later, watching the house next door sit hollow and dark, I realized that peace doesn't come from winning a fight. It comes from knowing you never needed their approval in the first place. And as the roses bloomed along the fence and Tyler's soft laughter echoed through my little house, I knew without a doubt. I had taken back more than just a house. I had taken back my life. I didn't want revenge for revenge's sake. I wanted justice. After I left the nursing home, after we filed the papers, after I delivered that sharp, "You have 30 days to get out" to my son Thomas, I felt something shift inside me. It wasn't rage, not anymore. It was something colder, clearer, the sense of reclaiming my power. Thomas and his wife Ashley had spent months believing they were untouchable, that they could take my house, my money, my dignity, and shove me aside without consequence. But they hadn't counted on one thing: I was still here. While Monica, my lawyer, handled the legal proceedings, I waited, patiently, deliberately. We didn't rush. We didn't gloat. We let the courts work, let the process move forward. And when the sheriff's notice came, giving Thomas and Ashley a deadline to leave the property, I sat quietly at the hotel, sipping coffee and watching the sun rise through the window. I didn't even need to be there. The thought alone was enough. Picturing them scrambling, packing their designer clothes and overpriced gadgets, realizing the house they'd claimed was slipping through their fingers. But that wasn't the end.